Hello, my name is Cudavetti Dye. I'm an artist in residence from Arts for All, Kentucky. Today I have with me my helper Jensen and my helper Cudavetti. Today we're going to be making water-based clay masks. This is something you can make with normal household items. We're all excited to be here and we can't wait to make these masks. What you need to make the mask is water-based clay. You're going to need a mold. You can find these at any art supply and arts and crafts store. If you can't find your mold or your mask, we're going to be making these from everyday household items. What you will need to make your mold is paper bag, newspaper, masking tape, and a plastic bag. First step in making your mask is to think about shape and what shape a mask is. What I like to make an assessment on is where does a mask go and how do we use masks? So first off, you think of the face and shape of the head. So to start that off, I'm going to open my paper bag, which is more like square. Then I'm going to take my newspaper and I'm going to start compressing it just a little bit to actually fill in my bag to start to create my shape. Just take your time, gently place your newspaper into the bag, then we can start creating our shape. Once we fill our bags, what we can do is start to compress our paper to generally get a shape of a face. Wherever your paper is folded, what you will need to do is take a little piece of masking tape. To hold down that area. The tape is going to be used as a really good reinforcement to compress the paper into a general shape or any shape that you want. You can use the tape to bind down some of these square areas. You can make it more circular or pyramid, any type of shape that you want. You see how my tape is binding down, changing it, altering it to a different shape. I have another bag here, and I'm gonna change this into more of a pointed shape. This is another type of shape that I've seen other kids make, where I'm kind of compressing it down and shifting the shape of the paper at the top. So I'm going to take my tape, and with my tape, I'm going to bring it around the bottom part to kind of compress that in. That student actually used this shape to make more of an animal shape mask mold. I think what they made specifically was an elephant. Also, you can build upon the top of this by taking a little bit more paper, if you like. And change that shape a little bit more. I could make a raised surface and take this down. Or I can add 2 pieces of paper to the outside to kind of extend it and tape that down as well. Once we have our general shapes of what we would like our mold or our mask on the inside to be, we're going to take this and we're going to put it into a plastic bag. The plastic bag is going to allow the paper to be removed from the clay that we'll be putting on top of this. Let's see what our helpers have made. What type of shapes do they have? Yep. Be unique, use your imagination to create any various shape that you can think of with the paper. So once you have your shape for your mask made out of paper, what we're gonna do is take a plastic bag and we're going to place our paper bag shape inside. You wanna make sure the plastic tightly fits around your paper mold. We're going to reinforce this by using our masking tape. What this will look like is, I'm gonna twist a little bit, gently twist, try to shift the air out of my bag. I'm going to reinforce the areas around by using my masking tape. Just take your time. I'm wrapping and taping. This process of covering your paper with plastic allows for your paper mold to be easily taken out of the clay once we wrap this with our clay material. Also, you can reuse it at a different time, so it preserves this shape if you want to make more than one. Or if you want to use this for a different project. Our helper's done. What shape did you come up with? Excellent work. You all are doing great. If I want certain areas to be more prominent, I can go back and add a little bit more tape. Kids at home, you could do this too. How is your piece coming along? Have you ever thought that you can use newspaper, plastic, and tape in this type of manner? It's pretty cool. It always brings me back to my childhood, finding resourceful things to create artwork. Okay, this is what I have so far. What does yours look like? Now that we created our mold, we're going to be covering our mold with our clay. You can use different types of clay. You can use air dry clay, or you can use oil-based clay if you like to. But what we're using today is water-based clay. This type of clay body will need to be fired in a kiln to temperature in order for it to truly cure. If you're doing this at home, I would recommend getting air dry clay. If you're using air dry clay, make sure that you try to slow down the drying process of your piece by covering it in plastic. Once your piece is almost dry, where it's still kind of wet, but it's able to hold its shape, you can remove your mold from behind and then let it dry the rest of the way. You could color these in the end, with acrylic paint to make your mask have more character when it is done drying. If it's water-based clay, it could take about a week to dry. If it's air dry clay, it could take about 1 or 2 days to dry out. But you want it to dry as slowly as possible to prevent cracking of your piece. So now let's get started on the next part. We're going to be flattening and rolling out our water-based clay. So how I approach rolling out my clay is, I'm going to use a rolling pin, and I try to think of going north, south, east, west. When I think of my compressions, I want to start from the center of the clay and push outward toward the edges. Start back at the center, going south, start at the center, going east, and going west. And I'll continue to spread my clay out until it's about 1/2 an inch to 1/4 of an inch. And to measure that, what I normally use is my pinky finger. That is a good indication of about 1/2 an inch or 1/4 of an inch. You can use your pinky finger too. And that will let you know that your clay is the appropriate thinness. For this assignment, I already have some clay that is pre-rolled that I'm gonna cut for my friends here. I'm using a fettling knife to gently cut through my clay. If you observe, that clay is almost the same thickness as my pinky finger, right? So how much clay you will need is probably something close to maybe 12 by 12. We're not gonna use all of this clay. What we're gonna do is use the excess to, I'm gonna lay it on top of, yeah, I have to use a whole lot more clay. What I'm doing is using my clay to kind of gently cover my mask form. I'm gonna cut some more for myself. Try to get it to. So what I'm gonna do, once you have your clay down, you're gonna gently take your hands and compress the clay around your mask form. It's okay if it overlaps a little bit. We're going to be cutting this down. The parts that fold over, you can kind of blend it in with your finger as you get it to compress. If you need assistance, have your parent help you. You're going to gently hug the clay with your hands, just pushing it down so it can get the general shape of your mold underneath. Once you have that, you're going to take your fettling knife tool and you're going to gently cut around your clay to get your general shape of what your mask is. Just gonna go ahead. This extra clay, we're going to be using that to enhance our features. Yep. You don't want to be wasteful. Any extra clay that you have, you can reuse it. You can use it for some of your details. Okay? What our mold is doing for our flat clay is creating structure to hold the clay in place so you can continue to work on top of it. How is your mask coming? Does it fit your mold? How does the clay feel? Is it sticky? Is it cold? I enjoy the feeling of clay. Once I have my form, I'm going to take my slab clay and I'm going to gently compress it in my hand to compress it into a ball. If you're using water-based clay or air dry clay, it's important to keep some plastic around to maintain the moisture in your ingredient or in your clay body. What that does is it allows for you to continue the workability of your material. Once I have my base shape, I'm going to start to take little pieces of clay to refine some of my details. I try to think of what features does a mask have. You know, it has eyes, maybe a nose, maybe a mouth. These can be drawn into the clay, or you can work additively by adding clay to the surface of your mask. If you're adding clay, there's a process where you have to agitate both sides when you're adding the clay in order for it to stick. You will need a little bit of water to attach various pieces from one side to the next. If you don't want to attach clay, you can always draw into clay. You can use other tools, such as dowel rods, to create patterns and textures in the clay. Working with clay, take your time. If you can use and you can allow your clay to maintain and stay wet, then you can always continue to go back and work on it. That is keeping your clay covered in plastic. You can always go back and rework into your material. You can use water to smooth. Out certain areas, you can use your finger to smooth out the clay. So facial features is, I normally use coiling, where you roll your clay into a coil to create general shapes. You can roll clay into a ball to create, I rolled a ball and I cut that ball in half, take the clay, compress it in your hand, roll it into a ball, and you could create eyes when you cut it in half. This is one side, this is the other side. Or you can just draw into the material as well to create your features. Yep. You use a hard surface. Remember that rolling pin that we use to roll out our clay? You can use your hand as the rolling pin to roll out the clay with gentle compressions, and the table stops the clay in a certain space to get it to conform to the shape that you want it to be. If you're having trouble, take your time. Instead of using a table, you have two hands you can roll it out with, or you could just cut a piece of your flattened clay, that slab, and use that as well. If you have extra. What I like to do with my remaining slab pieces is to practice what type of texture I want to add onto my mask. So you can use a dowel rod, a pencil, anything to kind of compress into the clay to create patterns and textures. Do you know what a pattern is? Pattern is a sequence of repeating shapes or numbers. So you can repeat the same shape and it will add another element to your piece. For eyes, right now, for my mask shape, I'm just adding in some details to my piece. With clay, it takes a little bit of time where you start off with your base shape just to get a general idea of what you want, and then you continue to build upon it. Jensen, what are you making? How's it coming along? Yeah. That is excellent. Great work. Jensen has used the coils and rounded up clay to create textures of hair. Those coils in a sequence creates a pattern. Those coils can become eyebrows. Those coils can become eyes and a mouth. What are you making, Cudavetti? So he's using the pinching technique where you can pinch the clay to create different shapes and different patterns, to create a hat, sunglasses, and a smiley face using his brush tool. The most amazing thing I like about clay is very impressionable. And what that means is that you can use different objects to create texture, patterns, and various shapes. If you look closely as you work with your clay, if you look closely, you can see your fingerprints in the clay. You see, at first, I'm using my fingers to smooth out. See that? Using my fingers to kind of smooth out my areas. I think my mask is missing something. What do you think that is? You see it? It's missing the nose, right? But it doesn't have to have a nose. Don't want it to. But I think I'll try to make some sort of nose. I don't know. I'm just using my imagination to create something. It's maybe an alien creature. That's what it's starting to come out and kind of look like. Maybe it's a fish. Yep, maybe so. So that means that instead of, so instead of having a nose, maybe this should have a fin somewhere, huh? Or gills. What do you think? Should I add a fin to this somewhere? Okay, that's what I'll do. Remember, clay is very, very forgiving. So you can always go back and rework into your artwork or your pieces. Just take your time and remember to cover your work in plastic. I can't stress or reinforce that more. That allows for you to go back and work with the material. So this can be a fast project, or this can be a long, ongoing project where you could take your time and do your best work. So far, this is the general shape that I have for my mask. What I'm going to do now is try to add texture. What texture does is it enhances the piece. It allows to give it more depth, more character, more expression. So I'm just using the end of my dowel rod to add little indentations into my mask to resemble fish scales. Use your creativity to give your mask character, give your mask depth. This is one of my favorite parts. One of my most favorite parts. This is going to allow for your masks to come to life. What about you all at home? Do you enjoy adding texture? Remember, clay is very impressionable, so you don't want to push through your clay body and go all the way down to your mold. You just want to add gentle pressure in order to give it just enough to where it has the expression or the desired texture that you want. Remember, take your time. And have fun. Remember, kids, you don't have to finish this in one day. It normally takes me a long time when I'm creating my mask or doing my projects in clay. It takes me a long time. So just take your time. If you want to stop at a stopping point, you can stop it and wrap it in plastic. You could spray it down a little bit with water. How are my workers doing? How's your project coming along? See how the texture enhances your piece? Just take your time, use your creativity. So now that you've added your texture, you want to give your project time to dry. So the best results is to allow your clay to dry out slowly. How I do this in studio is if this was a completed piece, I would have my piece on my board. Depending on how wet your clay is, you may want to absorb a little bit of moisture out of it by adding or covering it with newspaper. Once I cover it with newspaper, I will take my plastic and completely cover my piece. If your piece is lacking in moisture, so if your clay is a little bit drier, you take your piece, you'll cover it with plastic, and you allow for it to set. Wrap it. So I normally let my pieces set for about a week, and then I go and check them. With water-based clay, your clay will change color. If it's a gray clay or this is a white clay body, it will completely be bone dry. When this clay is leather hard is the state of the clay where a little bit of the moisture, it's no longer soft. My clay will be a little bit more denser. I will take my mold out of the back of it. I will clean up all of my edges, and then I'll let it set until it is greenware. When it is greenware, that means that all the moisture and water is completely evaporated from the clay. What that feels like is when you take some clay and you put it to your cheek, it's gonna be super cold. That's because it's still retaining water. With the greenware, it's gonna be warm to the touch, and it will have a chalky surface. If you look at your hands working with clay, you see how you have chalky clay, like flour on your hands? That is what greenware is. From greenware, then that's when that clay goes into the kiln. It takes about 3 days for a kiln firing, and this is the first stage. This is firing and changing that work to bisqueware. Those 3 days is 1 day to heat up, 1 day to cool down. The third day, you can take your clay out. Once you take it out, that's when we'll go into surface treatment using glazes to actually color the clay, and then we'll fire it one more time to get our final product, which would be shiny, beautiful art pieces. If you have air dry clay, you just allow for your clay to dry out slowly until it has that same type of chalky surface. Once it's dried out and warm to the touch, you can go ahead and you can paint your details using whatever color you choose or some sort of acrylic paint. You can give your pieces a whole lot of character. This has been so much fun. I had a great experience. Thank you to my helper Jensen. Thank you to my helper Cudavetti. They made some amazing artwork today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cudavetti Dye from Arts for All Kentucky. Have a great day.